I clearly told my dad his new wife was not welcome at my wedding. He agreed, then showed up with her anyway. So I uninvited them both. Later, they told everyone that I was influenced by my mom's negative energy. I'm a 29-year-old male and I just got married a couple of weeks ago. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but it turned into something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I've been replaying everything in my mind, and after reading a lot of similar stories online, I feel like I need to share what happened. Maybe it'll help me process everything. Let me start with some context. My parents divorced when I was 12. It wasn't a shock. My dad had been distant for years, but what had surprised me was how quickly he moved on. Within 6 months, he introduced me to Amy, a woman he met through work. Amy was nothing like my mom. She was loud, opinionated, and always seemed to have an agenda. As a kid, I tried to like her, but she made it impossible. She'd talk over me when I was trying to have a moment with my dad and made subtle digs about my mom whenever she thought I wasn't listening. By the time I hit my teenage years, my relationship with my dad was strained, and Amy didn't help. She had this way of inserting herself into every aspect of my life, often spinning things to make me look like the difficult one. If I tried to set boundaries, it somehow became a conversation about how ungrateful I was for all her efforts. Over time, I started pulling away. By the time I left for college, I only saw my dad on holidays and the occasional family event. Fast forward to last year, I got engaged to my now wife, Emma. Emma's amazing, kind, supportive, and someone who always makes me feel like I'm home. We decided we wanted a small wedding, something intimate with just close friends and family. Planning it was a dream, but as anyone who's been through it knows there's always drama. Ours centered around my dad and Amy. From the start, I made it clear that Amy was not invited. I didn't make this decision lightly. Over the years, she'd managed to alienate not just me, but also my siblings, and even some of my dad's extended family. Emma and I wanted a stress-free day, and having Amy there would guarantee the opposite. When I called my dad to tell him about the wedding, I explained this to him. He didn't take it well at first. He tried to play the understanding parent. He RSVP'd and said he'd come alone, but there was this tone in his voice that made me uneasy. Over the next few weeks, he brought Amy up in nearly every conversation, making comments like, "She really wanted to be there for you," or, "I hope you know how much this is hurting her." I brushed it off at first thinking he'd come around, but as the wedding got closer, the guilt trips became more frequent. He called one night suggesting that maybe Amy could just stop by for the reception. I shut that down immediately. Then he tried another angle, asking if it was fair to make him choose between his wife and his son. I told him it wasn't about choosing. It was about respecting the boundaries I'd set. After that, he went quiet. For the last month before the wedding, I barely heard from him. The big day finally arrived. Emma looked stunning. The venue was perfect and everything seemed to be going smoothly. I noticed my dad as soon as he walked into the ceremony. He was alone, just like he'd promised, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe he'd finally gotten the message, but that relief didn't last long. During the reception, as Emma and I were making our rounds, I spotted Amy. She was standing near the buffet, chatting with some of my cousins like she belonged there. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Why would she be here? But no, it was definitely her, and she was making herself comfortable. I excused myself and went looking for my dad. When I found him, he didn't even look surprised to see me. He just shrugged and said he couldn't leave her at home. He tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't a big deal and that no one else seemed to mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After weeks of explaining, after everything I'd made clear, he still decided to do what he wanted. I told him they both needed to leave. He started arguing, saying I was overreacting and that kicking them out would cause a scene. By this point, Emma had joined us and she didn't hesitate to back me up. The three of us stood there, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, while some guests started noticing the commotion. Eventually, my dad and Amy left, but not without making it clear how upset they were. My dad muttered something about how I was ruining my own wedding as he walked out. It was humiliating. I tried to shake it off and focus on the people who were there to celebrate with us, but the damage was done. I spent the rest of the night putting on a brave face, even though I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That's how my wedding day went from perfect to unforgettable for all the wrong reasons, and that's just the beginning of this mess. Update 1. The reception was supposed to be the fun part of the wedding, a chance to celebrate, dance, and enjoy the moment with people we love. Instead, It turned into something straight out of a bad reality show. After spotting Amy at the buffet, I went straight to my dad. The confrontation didn't take long to escalate. By the time Emma joined me, it was clear this wasn't going to end quietly. Emma didn't hesitate. She firmly told my dad and Amy they needed to leave. A small crowd had started forming nearby, and I could feel the weight of their stares. My dad's reaction wasn't subtle. He raised his voice, accusing us of being ungrateful and overdramatic. Amy stood off to the side, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression like she knew this was exactly what she wanted to happen. At one point, my dad tried to guilt-trip me, talking about all the sacrifices he made for me growing up, and how I was repaying him by humiliating him in front of family. Emma wasn't having it. She stepped closer, keeping her voice calm but firm, and repeated that they needed to leave. Amy finally spoke up, trying to paint herself as the victim, claiming she was only there to support my dad and didn't mean to cause any problems. It was clear we weren't going to reach any kind of resolution. Standing there in the middle of the reception, my dad made a big show of throwing his hands up loudly, proclaiming that he was done with this nonsense. He stormed out, dragging Amy along with him, but not before making a scene on his way out. He muttered something about how he couldn't believe his son would treat him this way loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. I noticed a few cousins exchanging awkward glances, clearly unsure of what to do or say. After they left, I felt this overwhelming mix of relief and embarrassment. Emma and I tried to shift the focus back to the celebration, but the mood had definitely taken a hit. Thankfully, our close friends were incredible. A couple of them pulled us aside, offering words of encouragement and making jokes to lighten the mood. One even got the DJ to play Emma's favorite song to get people back on the dance floor. Slowly, things started to feel a little more normal, but I couldn't shake the tension lingering in the air. By the next morning, the fallout had already started. I woke up to a slew of notifications on my phone. My dad had taken to social media, posting a vague, passive-aggressive message about how some people don't understand the meaning of family and how he always puts others first but gets nothing in return. The post was clearly about the wedding, and it didn't take long for people to start commenting. Some of my extended family chimed in, and while a few defended him, others asked for the full story. It was a mess. It didn't stop there. Amy had also posted, tagging my dad in a long-winded rant about how she tried so hard to be accepted, but was constantly shut out. She described me as controlling and disrespectful, painting herself as a saint who was unfairly treated. Reading it made my blood boil, but Emma reminded me to take a step back and not engage. The family group chat was the next battlefield. It started with a simple message from one of my aunts asking what had happened at the wedding. Within minutes, it snowballed into a full-blown argument. My mom chimed in, explaining that I'd set boundaries, and my dad had chosen to ignore them. My dad's siblings jumped in, some backing him up, others taking my side. One of my cousins even pointed out how Amy always seemed to create drama wherever she went. Amid the chaos, my mom called me privately. She was supportive, saying I'd done nothing wrong, but she also warned me about the potential long-term fallout. She reminded me how stubborn my dad could be and how this might create a permanent rift in the family. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but I appreciated her honesty. As the day went on, I started second-guessing myself. Did I overreact? Could I have handled the situation differently? The guilt was eating at me, so I decided to do what countless others have done in my shoes. I turned to Reddit. I wrote out a detailed post about what happened, laying out the events as objectively as I could. I didn't expect much, maybe a handful of comments, but within hours the post blew up. The responses were overwhelming. Most people agreed that my dad had crossed a line and that Amy had no business being there. A few commenters shared their own stories about difficult family members, and their words really resonated with me. Some even suggested cutting contact with my dad entirely, though I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Still, it was comforting to know I wasn't alone. By the end of the day, I felt a little more at peace with what had happened. I couldn't control how my dad or Amy reacted, but I could control how I moved forward. Little did I know this was only the beginning of the fallout. Update 2. The fallout from the wedding didn't slow down. After the initial explosion a few days later, my dad sent me a text. At first glance, it looked like an apology, but as I read it, the tone became clear. He started with, "I'm sorry for how things turned out," but quickly pivoted to how I'd blown everything out of proportion, and how Amy was only there because she didn't want him to feel alone. It wasn't the apology I was hoping for, and it didn't address any of the boundaries I had set. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I decided to go low contact for the time being. I muted his texts and ignored his calls, focusing on settling into married life with Emma. I let a few close family members know what was going on just to avoid any miscommunication. To my surprise, several of them reached out to me privately with messages of support. They had been at the wedding and had witnessed the confrontation. One of my uncles even mentioned that he'd never liked Amy and that she had a habit of stirring up drama at family gatherings. Emma's family was equally supportive. Her parents called us over for dinner and made a point to let us know how proud they were of how we handled things. They couldn't believe my dad and Amy had shown up knowing they weren't welcome. Emma's mom, who was normally very soft-spoken, actually called their behavior shameless, which made us laugh. It felt good to have a solid support system during all of this. In the middle of all this, one of my cousins suggested family counseling. She said it might help us communicate better and work through the issues with my dad and Amy. I wasn't sure if that was the right move. My dad had shown no signs of wanting to truly mend things, and Amy's behavior only made it harder to even consider sitting down with them in a controlled setting. Speaking of Amy, she was still on a roll. Her online posts were relentless. She shared vague updates about toxic family members and how people need to look in the mirror before judging others. In one post, she went as far as to tag mutual friends and family, which only added fuel to the fire. A few relatives started calling her out in the comments, which turned her posts into mini war zones. It was exhausting to watch, even from a distance. Emma and I made a decision. After all this going forward, we were going to be even more selective about who we included in family events. If someone couldn't respect our boundaries, they wouldn't be invited. It wasn't just about Amy anymore. It was about ensuring that our lives were as peaceful and drama-free as possible. It felt like the only way to move forward. With the online chaos still brewing, I decided to post a follow-up on Reddit. My first post had gotten a lot of attention, and I wanted to clarify some of the details for the people who had been following along. I explained how my dad's text wasn't a real apology, and how Amy's online behavior was making things worse. The post blew up even more than the first one. The comment section was full of people sharing similar stories and offering advice. It felt strange to have so many strangers weighing in on my family drama, but their support was comforting. One of the most surprising developments came from my younger sister. She texted me after seeing my Reddit update and shared her own frustrations with our dad and Amy. She told me about times when Amy had undermined her as well, often going behind her back to our dad to stir up trouble. Hearing her perspective solidified my decision to go low contact. It wasn't just me. Amy had been a consistent problem for years. Emma played a big role in helping me stay grounded during all of this. She reminded me that our focus should be on building our life together and not letting this drama consume us. She suggested that we set clear boundaries with my dad and leave the door open for reconciliation only if he was willing to respect them. It was sound advice, but the idea of actually giving him an ultimatum made me uneasy. Still, I started drafting a message. I wrote out everything I wanted to say, how I felt about what happened, the boundaries I needed moving forward, and what it would take for us to have a relationship again. I didn't send it right away. I wanted to get it right and make sure I wasn't acting out of anger. As I worked through the draft, I kept reading the comments on my Reddit post. People shared stories about estranged parents, manipulative step-parents, and the hard decisions they'd had to make to protect their peace. Their experiences helped me see that setting boundaries wasn't just about pushing people away. It was about protecting myself and the life Emma and I were building. For now, I'm taking things one step at a time. I haven't sent the message yet, but I'm getting closer to a decision. The support I've gotten from Emma, her family, my sister, and even strangers online has been incredible. It's made me realize that no matter how this plays out, I'm not alone in this. The next step is coming, and I'm ready for it. Update 3: After days of editing and rewriting, I finally sent the message to my dad. It was as clear and respectful as I could make it, but I didn't hold back on what needed to be said. I told him how his actions had hurt me, how he had crossed boundaries I'd set for my wedding, and how I needed him to respect those boundaries if we were going to move forward. I emphasized that this wasn't about Amy, even though she played a big role in the conflict. It was about his choices and how they impacted me. The reply came within an hour. It wasn't what I hoped for. Instead of addressing anything I'd said, my dad brushed it off. He called me too emotional and suggested I was making a big deal out of nothing. He claimed that bringing Amy to the wedding was about not leaving her out and that I'd overreacted. Reading it, I realized he wasn't ready to take any accountability for his actions. That's when I made the decision to give him an ultimatum. I wrote back laying everything out clearly. If he couldn't respect my boundaries and acknowledge how his actions affected me, then I couldn't continue a relationship with him. I wasn't cutting him off completely, not yet, but I made it clear that things had to change or we'd be headed in that direction. Shortly after, my sister called me. She'd heard about the message from my dad, who was venting to her about how unreasonable I was being. To my surprise, she fully supported my decision. She even shared more stories of how Amy had caused problems in her life, like making passive-aggressive comments during family gatherings or trying to interfere in her personal relationships. Hearing my sister validate my feelings gave me a sense of relief. It wasn't just me, but my dad wasn't done. A day later, he sent me another message, this time bringing up old wounds from the divorce. He accused me of being manipulated by my mom and suggested that my decisions were influenced by her negative energy. It was a classic deflection, and it only solidified my resolve. My mom, when I told her about it, reminded me that this was how my dad had always handled conflict, by shifting blame instead of addressing the issue. She urged me to be careful not to burn bridges completely, but I could tell she understood why I was frustrated. Emma, as always, had my back. She gently suggested that we might need to step back entirely from the drama until my dad was willing to approach the situation differently. Her reasoning was simple: we couldn't keep letting his actions disrupt our lives. It was hard to argue with her logic, especially as the situation kept escalating. Not long after, Amy decided to make her next move. She sent me a long email. The tone was condescending, filled with phrases like, "For your own good and you'll regret this one day." She blamed me for alienating my dad and accused me of being selfish. It was the final straw. I blocked her on every platform and didn't bother responding. The decision to go no contact with both my dad and Amy wasn't easy, but it felt necessary. I let him know that I wouldn't be engaging with either of them until there was a real effort to acknowledge what had happened and respect the boundaries I'd set. His response was silence at first, but the fallout was far from over. I updated Reddit about the situation, sharing the ultimatum, my dad's reaction, and the decision to go no contact. The post exploded, drawing even more attention than my previous updates. People shared their own experiences with difficult parents and step-parents, and the advice was overwhelmingly in favor of sticking to my boundaries. The validation was comforting, but it was bittersweet knowing how messy things had become with my dad. As expected, the extended family began taking sides. Some relatives reached out to me privately, expressing their support and sharing their own frustrations with Amy. Others, however, pressured me to reconcile. A few even suggested I apologize to keep the peace, which only added to the stress. One of my aunts, who I've always been close to, reached out with a different perspective. She told me about her own run-ins with Amy and how my dad had always enabled her behavior. She validated my feelings and reminded me that it wasn't my responsibility to fix the situation, especially when I was the one being disrespected. Blocking Amy seemed to pour gasoline on the fire. My dad started reaching out to mutual friends and family, trying to paint me as ungrateful and unreasonable. He told them that I was punishing him and that I'd let my mom and Emma poison my view of him. Some of the messages made their way back to me, but I chose not to respond. The drama was exhausting, and I didn't want to give it any more energy. Instead, I focused on healing. Emma and I threw ourselves into creating a positive, drama-free environment at home. We planned a small weekend getaway to unplug and reconnect, which was exactly what we needed. It felt good to put some distance between us and the chaos, even if only for a little while. I don't know what the future holds with my dad, but for now, I'm focusing on my marriage and the people who genuinely support us. The door isn't completely closed, but if he wants to be a part of my life, he'll need to walk through it on my terms. For now, that's enough. Update: 4 weeks after I went no contact with my dad and Amy, a package arrived at our door. Inside was a wedding gift, a high-end espresso machine that clearly cost a lot. Tucked under it was a handwritten note from my dad. It was short, asking if we could put everything behind us and move forward. There was no mention of the wedding drama, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just a vague call for peace. Emma and I stared at the gift for a while, unsure of what to do. On one hand, it felt like an olive branch, but on the other, it was hard to ignore the lack of accountability. I left the box unopened in the corner of the kitchen and tried to focus on other things, but the gesture kept nagging at me. That night, Emma and I talked about what to do next. She suggested therapy not just for me, but as a way to figure out how to navigate the situation with my dad. I wasn't sure at first, but the idea stuck. A few days later, I found a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and scheduled an individual session. The first session was eye-opening. The counselor helped me unpack the years of tension between my dad and me, the role Amy had played in it, and how the wedding drama had brought everything to a boiling point. It didn't fix anything overnight, but it gave me a better understanding of why I was so conflicted. Around this time, my sister and I met up for coffee. She had been keeping her distance from our dad too, and told me she was considering going fully no contact. She shared stories about how he had been trying to guilt trip her much like he had done with me, and how Amy's behavior had pushed her to the edge. It was clear that the strain wasn't just on me, it was on our entire family. Not long after I found out that my dad had been trying to bypass me by reaching out to my sister directly. He sent her long texts about how he missed us and wished we could all be a family again. My sister, to her credit, stood firm and didn't let him drag her into the drama, but it only added to the tension between us all. Meanwhile, Amy's social media antics were finally catching up to her. Her posts about toxic family members and being shut out for no reason started to backfire as mutual acquaintances began calling her out. Some even commented directly, pointing out that she'd overstepped at the wedding and had no right to play the victim. The comments eventually stopped and her account went quiet, which was a small but welcome relief. Then, out of the blue, my dad sent me a text. It was short and to the point, apologizing for the hurt caused and asking if we could talk. It wasn't perfect, but it felt sincere, more so than anything else I'd received from him in months. I decided to take it as a small step forward. Around this time, one of my aunts offered to mediate a conversation between my dad and me. She was one of the few family members who had stayed neutral throughout the drama, and I trusted her judgment. After some thought, I agreed, but only on the condition that Amy wouldn't be involved. My dad surprisingly accepted. Before the meeting, I laid out clear ground rules. I wouldn't tolerate deflection, guilt-tripping, or any attempts to shift blame onto me, Emma, or my mom. The conversation had to focus on what happened and how we could move forward. My aunt relayed these conditions to my dad, and he agreed. The meeting itself was tense. We met at my aunt's house, and from the moment I walked in, the air felt heavy. My dad started with another apology, which was a good sign, but it didn't take long for him to slip into familiar territory. He brought up how family should stick together and hinted that I should have been more understanding of Amy's feelings. I held my ground, reminding him of the boundaries I had set and how he had knowingly crossed them. For the first time, my dad seemed to genuinely listen. He admitted he'd made a mistake bringing Amy to the wedding and that he hadn't fully considered how it would affect me. He asked for patience as he worked on navigating his relationship with her while trying to mend things with me. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it felt like progress. Notably, Amy was absent from the meeting. I don't know if that was my dad's decision or hers, but either way, it made the conversation easier. Without her there, the focus stayed on us, and we were able to have a more honest discussion. By the end of the meeting, I agreed to take small steps toward rebuilding my relationship with my dad. I wasn't ready to jump back into regular contact, but I told him I'd be open to future conversations if he continued to respect my boundaries. Afterward, I updated Reddit about what had happened. The responses were mixed. Some people encouraged me to keep trying, while others warned me to stay cautious. For now, I'm approaching the situation with cautious optimism. It's still a long road ahead, but at least there's a glimmer of hope. Update 5. Since the mediated meeting with my dad, I've been navigating a new kind of relationship with him, limited but functional. We've kept communication light, mostly exchanging the occasional text or phone call. I've made it clear that I'm not interested in rehashing old conflicts or involving Amy in our conversations. So far, he's stuck to those boundaries, though our contact remains minimal. Therapy has been a game changer throughout all of this. My counselor has helped me recognize patterns in my dad's behavior, how he uses guilt and deflection to avoid accountability, and how I've unconsciously played into those dynamics over the years. More importantly, I've learned how to disengage from those patterns and prioritize my mental health. It's been liberating to shift my focus away from fixing the relationship and toward simply maintaining healthy boundaries. Interestingly, Amy seems to have taken a step back. Since her social media posts started backfiring, she's gone quiet online. I haven't heard from her directly, and mutual relatives have mentioned that she stopped bringing up the wedding drama at family gatherings. Whether it's genuine or just a tactical retreat, I don't know, but it's made things a lot less stressful. The first big test of my new approach came with the holidays. My dad extended an invitation for Emma and me to join his family for Thanksgiving. Amy would be hosting at their house. It didn't take long to decide. We politely declined. Instead, we spent Thanksgiving with Emma's family surrounded by warmth, laughter, and absolutely no drama. It was the most relaxed holiday I've had in years, and I didn't miss the tension that would have inevitably come with seeing my dad and Amy. My sister has been on a similar journey. She's remained low contact with our dad and has avoided gatherings where Amy is present. We've grown closer through this shared experience, often leaning on each other for support and validation. It's been comforting to know I'm not the only one setting boundaries. In the meantime, Emma and I have been focusing on building a strong support system. Our friends have been incredible, always there to listen, offer advice, or just distract us with a good time. Emma's family has welcomed me with open arms, making me feel like I belong in a way I never quite felt in my own family. These relationships have been a reminder that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when it matters most. My dad has made a few attempts to reconnect, but they felt superficial. He'll send a random text asking how I'm doing or sharing an article he thinks I might like. While I appreciate the effort, it's clear that these gestures are more about maintaining appearances than genuine reconciliation. For now, I'm content with keeping things surface level. The deeper conversations will only happen if he's willing to address the past honestly, and I'm not holding my breath for that. One surprising development has been the complete silence from Amy. Not only has she stopped posting about the situation, but she hasn't made any attempts to reach out to me directly. I've heard through this grapevine that the extended family's backlash hit her harder than expected, which might explain her retreat. It's been a relief to not have her stirring the pot for once. Reflecting on everything, I've realized how much I've grown through this ordeal. The old me might have bent over backward to keep the peace even at the expense of my own well-being. Now I'm more assertive and confident in standing up for myself. It's been a tough journey, but it's shown me the importance of valuing my own boundaries and mental health. Looking back on my wedding day, I can finally separate the good from the bad. Despite the drama, there were so many beautiful moments: Emma walking down the aisle, the heartfelt speeches, dancing with our friends late into the night. Those are the memories I choose to hold on to. The rest is just a reminder of why boundaries are so important. Before I wrap up this saga, I want to take a moment to thank the Reddit community. Sharing my story here and reading your comments has been an unexpected source of strength. Your advice, encouragement, and even your tough love have helped me navigate one of the most challenging chapters of my life. I genuinely don't think I would have handled things as well without this outlet. As for the future, I've made a firm decision. I won't attend any family event where Amy is present unless she offers a genuine apology. My dad knows this, and I've made it clear that this boundary isn't negotiable. If he chooses to respect it, great. If not, I'm at peace with whatever distance that creates. For now, I'm focusing on the life Emma and I are building together. We're planning a small vacation soon, just the two of us, to celebrate surviving the chaos and coming out stronger. It feels like a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited for what's ahead. To anyone reading this who's dealing with similar family struggles, you're not alone, and it's okay to prioritize your happiness. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back, set boundaries, and let go of what you can't control. Thank you all for following along on this journey. This is my final update, and I can truly say I'm moving forward with a sense of closure and peace.